In 1412, in the village of Domrémy, Joan of Arc was born into a world of famine, war, and fear. A peasant girl, illiterate, with no sword or status. Yet by 19, kings would kneel, armies would follow, and her name would echo through history, in blood and ash. History calls her a heretic, a cross-dresser, a witch. It doesn't tell you about the coffin-sized cell, the iron cage, the daily threats of rape, or how the church, God's own, burned a teenage girl alive and watched her suffer. We will. Because Joan wasn't destroyed by enemies. She was destroyed by fear, by men, by systems desperate to control her faith. At 13, Joan heard voices, not doubts, but divine light, golden, blinding. Saint Michael, Saint Catherine, Saint Margaret. They told her, a girl who'd never left her village, to save France. The 100. Years' war was bleeding France dry. The English held vast lands. The uncrowned king, Charles VII, hid behind doubt. His armies were broken, his spirit weaker still. Then came Joan, barefoot, dirt under her nails, claiming God's mission to crown the king and drive out the English. They laughed, they sneered, then they listened. Because Joan had what they lacked, conviction. In 1429, Joan arrived at Orléans in white armor, on a white horse. Soldiers kissed her hem. Commanders bowed. The Maid of Heaven led troops into battle, and won. Orléans was freed. Arrows pierced her chest. She fought on. Bloodied but radiant, she became France's symbol. At Reims, Charles VII was crowned, just as she'd promised. She should have gone home. But miracles don't linger without consequence. Joan turned the tide of war, but power is jealous. Crowned king had no use for a peasant girl who spoke to angels. She wouldn't marry, wouldn't be silent, wouldn't stop. Her visions demanded action, not obedience. When the English captured her at Compiègne in 1430, Charles sent no rescue, no armies, no demands. He let her rot. The war for her soul had begun. Rouen, 1431. Joan was thrown into a dungeon, shackled not to prevent escape, but to strip her humanity. Interrogated over 100 times, often without counsel, she faced 70 charges: heresy, sorcery, dressing like a man. She wore armor to survive battle. Men's clothes to fend off rape in prison. The church didn't see self-defense, they saw rebellion. Scene, interrogation chamber. SFX, quill on parchment, whispered Latin prayers. Bishop Pierre Cauchon, promised English favor, didn't want truth. He wanted submission. But Joan's clarity terrified them. Joan voiced, defiant, "I am not afraid. I was born for this. They couldn't break her spirit, so they broke her body." Joan wasn't kept in a cell. She was locked in an iron cage, bound by neck, hands, and feet. Day and night, no privacy, no sleep, just cold walls and rats. She fell ill. She bled. She cried. But she never broke. The church approved torture, but feared a backlash, so they turned to psychological crucifixion, threats of execution, whispers of assault, priests offering mercy for confession. Still, she said, Joan voiced steady, "My voices told me what to do." What scared them wasn't that she heard God. It was that she believed him. May 24th, 1431. Joan stood before a pyre, flames ready, threatened with death. She signed a confession, denouncing her visions, admitting heresy, swearing off men's clothing. For a moment it seemed the nightmare ended. But systems built on fear don't stop. They pause to crush you properly. Back in prison, the English stripped her of women's clothing, forcing her into men's garments. When she complied to protect herself, the church called her a relapsed heretic. The punishment? Death. No more trials. Just the pyre. May 30th, 1431. 19-year-old Joan was led to the stake. A paper hat labeled her heretic, relapsed, apostate, idolater. They tied her to the post, piled wood around her, lit the fire. As flames rose, she didn't curse or beg. She prayed. Joan voiced fervent, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus." Scene, flames consuming the stake. SFX, roaring fire, faint heartbeat. The crowd wept, soldiers, priests, jailers. A priest held a cross high so she could see it through the flames. One witness cried, "We are lost. We have burned a saint." Her body was burned 3 times. Ashes scattered into the Seine. No relics, no tomb, but silence couldn't erase her. Rumors spread. Her heart survived the flames. The sky darkened unnaturally. Angels wept. The English tried to silence these stories, but truth seeps through cracks. Allies defected. Bishops hid. Joan's name returned, not in ridicule, but reverence. The girl who spoke to saints became a specter haunting the guilty. 25 years later, Charles VII ordered an inquest to clear his name. Over 100 witnesses, soldiers, guards, villagers testified. They didn't describe a heretic but a martyr. In 1456, Joan was declared innocent. Her trial was exposed as corrupt, fraudulent, politically driven. The church that condemned her now mourned her. Too late for the girl turned to ash. In 1920, nearly 500 years after her death, Joan was canonized a saint. The church that lit the match gave her a halo. She became France's patron saint, a symbol of justice, a cry for the oppressed. But saints are tamed truths. The real Joan was wild, human, unshakable. Her pain, shackles, cages, threats, was her power. The fire killed her body, but psychological warfare targeted her soul. Sleep, deprivation, isolation, gaslighting, threats of assault. Priests told her, "Your voices are demons. If God loves you, why are you here?" She was mocked, baited, shamed, yet her will held firm, a heroic act of psychological resistance. Her charges were religious, but the reasons were darker. A poor girl rose above her class, dangerous. She spoke to God without a priest, revolutionary. She won battles without male command, unforgivable. She humiliated the English, intolerable. She refused her assigned role, uncontrollable. They didn't burn a heretic, they burned a mirror reflecting their flaws. Joan's story isn't ancient, it's modern. The machinery of injustice, legal loopholes, public spectacles, manipulated faith, still grinds. It targets whistleblowers, journalists, dissidents, women, children who speak truth. She burned in 1431, but the match still burns. They thought fire would erase her. It revealed her. The girl they called a witch became a saint. Her trial meant to silence became her gospel. In the smoke of her execution, we see resistance, burning still,